Mhm. All right. I think we're live. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Bob Weathers here at Your Vitality Project, and I'm with our regular Friday night guest, who I'm delighted to have with us again tonight, Angela MacLeod.
Hi, Bob. Good to be here with
Yeah,
you.
nice to see you, Angela. I think I hear a fan or something, Angela. You're aware of what that is, or?
Might be our solar thing. Is it really loud?
It's just going in and out, and if it's sometimes the microphones are odd here. They'll amplify something that is not, you don't hear it on your end.
I don't really. It's very, very light here.
Okay. Let's just let it go. I just wanted to double check and see.
I can't turn it off, whatever it is. So
Yeah, let's just let it be, and we'll just go with the flow.
okay.
In fact, that's the topic we're looking at tonight, is going with the flow of our recovery. We're looking at advanced recovery from enslavements or addictions of every kind, whether it be to substance or other behaviors. And we've talked a lot about that here, Angela. And tonight the topic is specific around how do we identify what it is that success might be in our recovery, especially looking at, we've looked at this week about kind of literal sobriety, but we've looked at, can we drop a level deeper into talking about the quality of our sobriety, the quality of our recovery, which is more the subjective sense. You can kind of objectively mark off how many days or weeks or months maybe that you've been literally sober, but to drop into the subjective dimension requires qualitative terms to describe that, in terms of maybe relief or peace of mind, or we can just go down the list. And so it opened me into tonight's conversation, which is related to a post that's coming out today or tomorrow, which is how do we name what success means to us, specific to recovery from whatever it is that we're wishing to recover from. And maybe another way to put it is, what do we want to recover towards? And so I open into that, knowing that you will have been thoughtful about this and love to dialogue with you, but just love to hear any thoughts that you have to start off with, Angela.
Okay. Yeah. Big topic. Pretty important one, I think, too.
Thank you.
How do we name what defines our recovery, or what really, on the experiential level, beyond, like you're saying, beyond how many days of clean time we have. Yeah. It reminds me that there was a period of time a number of years ago that I had almost 7 years of absolute abstinence from alcohol. I had another addiction that was maybe would be considered less, less serious at the same time. But during that, and I felt like there was progress. I was making progress in different areas of my life during that time. But when I look back on it, I was pretty unhappy. You mentioned in one of the posts, being sober, but being miserable. And I did not feel like there was a movement in my life of growth or, peace of mind. That doesn't mean that, even the most healthy people have difficulty, right? So we're not looking for a complete absence of difficulty. And so that turns me towards, what came to my mind first on this topic was basically having the capacity to deal with life, to deal with my life, to deal with whatever is going on inside of me and whatever the circumstances are. And that's going to be very different from one person to another. And so for me, one thing that signifies the quality of my recovery is what is the capacity that I'm developing or building, and that it isn't a fixed thing. It isn't like, I can't just say it's this, and this, and that's it. It's evolving, it's changing over time. And, this actually is an interesting topic for me, because I can still have some big dips into what might be called depression, or, be feeling like I'm struggling.
Yes.
And in my life, and And so I don't want to, I can't say that the quality of my recovery is low because I'm having some difficulties, or maybe even serious difficulties. You know, it's for me, it's more looking at the flow, like you said earlier, or the direction of how things are building or growing around what I would call capacity. But yes, you know, I definitely still want to see improvement in my sense of equanimity and peace, and feel like I'm succeeding. I'm having little successes as I'm going, because that gives me the sense of motivation, because you know, it makes me feel like I'm on the right track. You know, if we're doing all the right things, but life is horrible and it's never feeling like it's getting better, then maybe there needs to be a, you know, a revision, or taking another deeper inventory about what's happening. So it's easy for me to kind of come up with a list of qualities that I am experiencing, or that are becoming more constant in my life, like the quality of relationships that I have with people. And I could say that I could kind of step back even and say what was missing, you know, while I was in active addiction, or what even before addictions became really kind of took over my life. Because I was not very happy, you know, before I actually started drinking, or the eating disorder became more difficult for me. And so looking at kind of the aliveness of how I'm dealing with things in my life. So now when the things that are difficult for me in my life feels really different to me than when I was in active addiction. It felt like it was difficult and it was getting worse and worse and going down. Now there's bumps and there's difficulties, but I have a lot more resources. I have people I can reach out to. And so that's feels important to me, to be able to distinguish between the challenges while being in addiction, and then what are some of the challenges when I'm in recovery, that they're qualitatively different. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm right with you. A couple of thoughts cross my mind as I'm listening to you. Psychology talks about distress tolerance. You know, our capacity to be with the stressors that we face, and you've shared here talking about the window of tolerance. You know, of trying to find kind of that sweet spot that allows us to navigate life. And it's not immune from stressors. It's not immune from distress. But what can we do to find increasing resilience? And what comes to mind, I've been just this week, I'm shifting over from my memory work with the poetry of Rumi to my memory work with the poetry of Lao Tzu. So I've just started that this week, which is a joy for me. It's been a while since I spent some time with the Tao Te Ching. And there's a couple of phrases that he has that seem relevant to me. And they came up to me spontaneously listening to you. One of them, he says, is the heavy is the root of the light. And I think, you know, if you think of heaviness, most of us, if you think of heaviness in terms of emotional burden, let's say, you wouldn't say, bring it on, you know. But sometimes life brings it on. Sometimes life brings it on. So what kind of rose, I was just kind of like sitting listening to you and just allowing images to percolate, is that what if I can develop a capacity to be with that which is heavy in my life? If it's distress or whatever term we would use for that, and that my capacity to be with that overall actually leads in the direction of light, is that there can be an experience for me. There is an experience for me, is that I'm less fearful. I'm thinking of how you were talking about depression, Angela. How have you talked about it recently? It's an energetic, how do you describe it?
Boy, it's not coming right to mind.
It's like a lull or an ebb. You have a beautiful way of putting it.
Well, the biorhythms, my
Yeah,
biorhythms. So
yeah,
like there's a dip. I call
yeah.
it a biorhythm dip. Yeah.
That's everything. Yeah, biorhythm dip. I like that because I don't know, it has a better feeling to me than calling it depression. Depression can seem so kind of psychopathological, but
Mm.
let's say that I have a bioenergetic dip and I have the capacity to be with that. My capacity to be with that may enable me to find shafts of light even amidst it, but certainly recover to light, that seems like to me. So I don't walk around fearful of hitting one of these dips insofar as I have a capacity to be with it. There's another passage in Lao Tzu where he says, the path into the light sometimes appears as darkness. The path forward sometimes appears as if going back, going backwards. And I was spending some time with that this morning as I was in my swimming meditation. Is that what would it be like to be with? What would it be like to be able to go back? To go backward for the sake of moving forward. On Wednesday, you may have seen this. Doug Prater and I talked, and he introduced this term that I shared today in our group, and I still can't remember the name of it, dadgummit. Yeah, I was going to take me a while to learn that term, but it's this idea. It came from you. It was inspired by the idea of pruning.
Okay, yeah. Was it hermosis?
Yeah,
or hermetic?
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to find it.
Yeah.
But let's just call it pruning. The idea that you talked about so beautifully in our group, pruning off living materials in service of the organism's growth and movement forward. Yeah, that's moving backward in some ways for the sake of moving forward, or moving into the dark for the sake of moving into light. And so maybe it's a different way of understanding recovery. I think it's a different way of understanding recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the image of pruning, is in terms of gardening, is that we have living plants in the garden, and we prune we prune away things that there's still a living part of the plant that we're cutting and removing, but we carefully choose or select what we're going to remove, which then allows what's left to flourish.
Yeah.
And but the plant gets stressed by that. So you're cutting living parts of the plant, and it's going to have a period of maybe going into somewhat of a shock. So it may not look good. It may kind of be dormant for a little while as it's adjusting, and as it's it's literally relying more on the roots that are down in the earth to regroup and then to send new energy back up to the parts that's left. So there can be a look in the beginning, that it doesn't look as good because you've cut away and it looks a little bit more thinned out. Yeah. But then it allows the energy that's there to really put that energy into the rest of the plant. So I think what you're referring to with that term, which I also can't quite remember, is just this idea that we can selectively let go of things that it might be painful, or it might feel like we're losing something. Yeah. But in the process, we actually let there be more energy for the things that we want to grow. And flourish in.
Yeah. I love the way that you talk about the pruning, and it makes me think this for me at least is part of what so-called success in recovery might entail, is that there would be the capacity to be pruned, or even to choose for pruning for the sake of greater growth. And so it's no longer hanging on by my fingernails. It's actually having the fluidity, the ability, the flexibility to be able to ebb and flow with life's challenges. And that feels really good for me, for the sake of the long haul, that I can absorb temporary losses. I like that a lot. It's beautiful. I'm gonna mark that as one of my aims of success. And it's not just an aim; it's an experience. And I think it's implied by what you were saying. It welled up for me listening to you. Is further we get in our recovery, the deeper the roots go, the more nourished and supported I feel by those roots. Even under duress, I don't feel left bereft.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so where from here? I noticed in your in the post that you mentioned having a vision for a fully recovered life, and I have mixed feelings about that because I don't know if it's just my particular psychological makeup, but when it's like a mixed bag for me to have a vision for something, you know, of how things could be. And then also becoming attached to that or having it too perfect, and then feeling like I can never get there, or I measure where I'm at now against the vision that I have. So like I often do when, you know, when I see a question or a topic like this, you know, having it, what is your vision for a fully recovered life? I think I have, again, I think it's really just me personally, because there's like a couple of things in there, fully recovered. So I take things literally. And so then that becomes a perfection, you know, so like that I could ever get to a state that would be called fully recovered, you know, so that may just be me, or maybe there's some people like that too. And so honestly, I don't know that I have a vision for a fully recovered life, but I can talk about qualities that I'm experiencing that are growing and that I long for. Like you also mentioned somewhere in that post, you know, that besides just staying sober, what do we long for? You know, what can life be that's more fulfilling for us? And so that's easy for me to think about and play with. And just as a side note, I just think that's very interesting. And I've noticed this with other people, talking with other people. Maybe it's a theme lately that we're so individual about how we use words and terminology and what meanings we give them. And that I sometimes look now for, if I feel resistance, like if I hear somebody use a word and I feel resistance, I want to just say, okay, I feel that resistance, but let me just let me pause here and not jump to a conclusion. You know, like, what do they mean by it, and what else could this mean to me? And so I kind of allow it to be more of like a little exploration. And so I ended up coming up with, you know, a list of things that I'm really excited about, I'm enthusiastic about in my life, you know, like having a sense of purpose, being in touch with what I love and what I feel are gifts. Maybe that's more, you know, I have some gifts or some talents that as I develop them to make them something that I can share with people so that I have a sense of contribution. So it's one thing to have a gift and to enjoy it, but for me, it's much more satisfying if I find a way to share that with people, if it becomes useful. And so for me, you know, the deeper sense of satisfaction of recovery, of long-term health in recovery, is qualities like that. Sense of purpose, a sense of developing whatever I have, or you developing whatever you have, being able to support other people in doing that. So theirs may look different than mine, what their gift is. And so having satisfying and nourishing relationships is really important. Even before addiction, I didn't have a lot of satisfying relationships that I felt like I could count on. And so for me, something, instead of like even recovering something or getting my life back as if it was better before addiction, it actually wasn't better. I mean, maybe it was in some ways, but for me, there was a lot of difficulty before addiction, and then addiction entered my life and it was really difficult. So I'm looking forward to actually, maybe it's more like recovering my original potential.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I really appreciate your amplifying that. I can understand your resistance to the terminology for what you associated to it. It makes complete sense to me, and I can see the associations. I don't think you'd be the only person that would respond that way. It just happens to be your response. I know that in my using that language now, I can think back and think, yeah, it makes sense to me that it would evoke that response. I think my using that language is very much in the spirit of what you're saying right now. I almost think of fully recover when I use that term. It's in the context of a language that I have that's really problematic for me, and this may step on toes. It's not intended to, but this idea that people talk about being addicts when you could say, relatively speaking, we all have various forms of enslavement, and I would understand that. But there's a way that it's somehow talked about as I'm an addict, or we're addicts, or that's addict thinking. And I'm uncomfortable with that because I think it's human thinking, for one thing. I don't slice reality up into addicts and normies. I feel like that we all have both in us.
Yeah.
And some of us have been seriously addicted. I have been, you have been to substance, and so be it. But I think the language really matters. And so to talk about recovery, I wanted to talk about it, and I was aware of stirring up something. I wasn't thinking of stirring this up. I was aware of stirring it up, realizing that this is not a language that's used in a lot of recovery situations. People don't talk about having recovered. The best it gets is I'm an addict, and they might say I'm in recovery. There's a way that's always true too. I'm not disagreeing with that. I wanted to open up something, and I guess the feeling, it's almost more of an image for me, is there is a way. I'd be interested to compare notes with you. There's a way for me that the fundamental direction of my life has shifted such that I've recovered. I liked how you just put it. I've recovered a fundamental direction in my life, or it has recovered me. That's probably closer to it. That I live in, and I'm confident of, and from one moment to the next, I can lose direction. But that fundamental direction has got me, and it's fully recovered. And I even include what you say in my assumption, because I think using the language of recovery is problematic. And you and I've talked about this. If you've never had it before, calling it recovery doesn't even make sense, semantically. And so why not call it discovery if it's something that you're discovering for the first time? And so the language I want to hold loosely. It's almost like you and I talked about this before. The term perfection is so problematic. We interpret that in contemporary English usage as an end state without flaws. I don't mind that term, but I think of it in terms of its derivation from the ancient Greek understanding, which meant completion. And I feel like completion itself is a process. And so when I talk about fully recovered, it isn't like a complete product. It's like the center of gravity has shifted, and that's been fully recovered enough so that I can trust it. And I think that, I realize it requires amplification, and there's still limitations in that definition. I don't assume that I've come up with some superior definition to conventional usage. I just want to critique conventional usage for its hold on language sometimes, because I think the language is problematic. My languaging in here has its limitations. I really acknowledge that. I think alternate languages have their limitations too. And I like having a conversation like we're having, where we can amplify it, kind of pull it apart, and then apply it personally, because what works for one person may not work for another person. I personally don't find using the language of referring to myself as an addict for the rest of my life particularly useful. I've got lots of reasons for that. A lot of them have to do with my training as a clinical psychologist around the fundamental attribution error, which that commits. And I'm not comfortable doing that. Somebody who doesn't have my background, it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't care, and they might find it useful. And I think more power to all of us to find our languages. I prefer having a conversation, though, where we can have like a marketplace of ideas, rather than any certain idea having if there's only one, there's only kind of like a fundamentalism of language that I would oppose, and I know you do too. So I actually really appreciate, I always do, Angela, your response to any post, because you do have a sense of when something doesn't sit well with you. And time you bring it, it's illuminating to our
Mm.
conversation. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
I actually
absolutely.
felt a little nervous coming into this because I noticed that I was reacting to some of the terms.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
even if I react to a terminology,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
I know you really
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
and I got what you were meaning. I got what
Mhm.
you were
Mhm.
going for,
Mhm.
in this topic. And
Mhm.
so I'm really glad to hear that, just
Mhm.
being able to bring up, well, it hit me
Mhm.
this way, and I'm
Yeah.
working with
Yeah.
it, because I really, really value this quality of
Yeah.
communication
I mean,
around it, because it's actually, I think, very common for us humans to have different experiences with different meanings for words and terminology, and I think we even talked about this recently.
yeah.
But it's in the being willing to kind of go back and forth about it, and to hear, oh, this
Yeah.
is what you mean, or that's how it hit me.
Yeah.
And in that exchange, I
Yes.
think that the real benefit, or the real
Mhm.
value of
Yeah.
the talking about it, is more important to me than
Yeah. Yeah.
whether or not we have the exact same experience with the same word or term.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
Fully agree. We have that with each other, and I would encourage. I feel like we're modeling for others how to move through disagreement, and that there be a
Mm.
process, that be an umbrella that embraces diversity. And I feel like we're modeling it here by this conversation. I hope that you'll bring, every time you have a reaction, insight to any languaging that I might use here at Vitality Project. And you've done it before, and I hope you'll do it again, because it's in the interface between two different subjectivities, yours and mine, that
Mhm.
we create something. That's how creativity works, and we're doing it right now. We're creating something new as we're talking
Mhm.
about this.
Mhm.
Angela, I've got to scoot right now.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
love the conversation. I hope others have found it valuable. I hope others will respond. If anybody wants to continue conversation with me, you can do it through Vitality Project. I encourage you to reach out to me, and I'll pass along to Angela any conversations. I feel like the most important thing we've talked about tonight is this process. I'm
Uh-huh.
really, really
Mhm.
grateful for it. And all the rest is icing on the cake. So thank you, Angela. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
doing it. Wish you a beautiful evening, a good weekend. Wish
Yeah.
everybody blessings and safety. Take
Yeah.
care. We'll see you again next Friday. Bye
All
bye,
right.
everybody. Bye bye. Good night.